Well, hey everybody, it's springtime. I'm getting ready to put the chaparral back in the water, and so I'm just going to touch base. I'm going to just double check my lithium ion batteries for the trolling motor. Currently well, let me back up. In fall, normally I don't do this, but I wanted to see how it worked out. So I charged them to the top and I let them relax. And I've been letting them sit all winter with a full charge. Normally I would leave them somewhere in the middle. But again, for the sake of doing some charge testing, I said, okay, let's see how it works for a few months. And where I'm at right now is they charged all the way up. Got them up to 14.6, and then they relaxed over a period of days down to 13.3. Now, according to the official chart, 13.3 would only be 90%. It would be as though they lost 10%, and really in those first few weeks with nothing being used. And I've been watching since December. Every time I get near the boat, I fire up the app and I check the voltages. And the answer has been consistent that they've been just totally steady. It dropped to 13.3 and they've been just holding steady all winter. So that's a good starting point. After a bit, I'm going to plug in the charger and just let them come back up to 14.4 or so. And again, re-zero. Make sure that they're at 100% at 14.4 to 14.6. I'm sure they've been equalized out, so I'm not going to let it sit there very long. It will just be to make sure I have a full charge before I put it in the water, and then I can use the monitor and see how they operate as I go fishing and other things. So that's the story now. Back in a little bit. Okay, well, I'm ready to power up the system to charge the batteries. We'll power it up. We'll see how long it takes when it gets up to about 14.2, and let it go through a little bit of absorption, and then we'll shut her down. Now on the BMV-712 on my lithium battery monitor, it's been 4.5 hours and it's still charging. Now I know I'm using my ProMonitor charger, which is not optimized for lithium batteries, and the voltages are starting to come up. What I will say though is there are two things about the BMV and the way I've got it wired. First of all, one is the batteries, according to Battleborn, lose about 2 or 3% a month. There's also a factor from the BMV that the monitor runs all the time. It has a little brain in it, and it's monitoring the batteries. Under my current setup, I have the monitor it's monitoring one battery and assuming it's tracking the other. Over the winter, the monitor was drawing off of one battery, and so even though when I started this process the voltages on the two batteries were equal from over the winter, now as I'm going through the charge process, I can see that the battery I'm not monitoring and wouldn't have the load from the perhaps wouldn't have as much load from the battery monitor. It is coming up and charging faster than the one I'm monitoring. So there's probably a half a volt difference between them at the moment. So we'll watch this and see how it goes. But at the moment it's coming up. It's just taken a while. I think I need to go and get one of those no-co chargers that has the right profile on it, and I would be better off. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm finishing up the video for the spring prep on the boat. I've had a little bit of delay here because of my health things with the kidney stone and hurting my leg and stuff, so Here's kind of the finish and the follow-up on it, and you know, we can follow along here. I've got a screen show going, and let's talk about the final issues here and how it wraps up. Now I'm going to move on to batteries and my BMV-712. Here's a picture. I did a screenshot off the monitor of my trolling motor batteries with the Battleborn lithium ions being recharged. And this is using the standard charger that I have currently, which is my ProMariner, which is optimized for lead acid, but was acceptable to Battleborn because its limits were within range for the lithium battery, which means that you don't exceed 14.6 volts is the main one. So anyway, you can see here that when I charged it, this is the current into the one battery. You know, I was getting what, 7-8 amps peak, and then it tails off. For some reason the monitor had a few glitches here, and then it tails off and goes down to like 0.4 of an amp or so. And what I kind of wanted to look at here was how far down were they, right? Because the monitor couldn't tell me. It just gave me a voltage. It said the battery was what, 13.3. And again, as a reminder, because of the way this monitor operates, I have two 12-volt batteries in series to make a 24-volt set. I only have the monitor on one battery, and my assumption is that the second battery follows the first battery. They're equal, and they're in series. So when you drain one down, you drain the other one down at the same number of amp hours. You pull the same number of amps out of both of them, and so they should track with each other. So in any case, for the one battery, if you go from up here and you take a run down and you go to the bottom and kind of just do a straight line, I haven't done the numerical integration, but you know, I'm about halfway down here is about 3.9 or 4 amps. If you said over the time that I charged, what's the average current? The average current is somewhere around 4 amps. If you go down here and you look at the time scale, we went from 1500, which is 3 o'clock, to 2100, which is 8, 9 o'clock in the evening. So that's like 6 hours. So we ran an average of 4 amps over a 6-hour period. So 4 amps times 6 hours would be 24 amp hours. This is a 100 amp hour battery, so 24 amp hours would be about 25%, about a fourth of its capacity. And you know, it's give or take a little bit, but they were full when I parked it. So in spring, you know, I last charged them in late November, and this was done in early May. So that's like 5 months, 6 months, so half a year. I got 25% loss, and that loss was a combination of the battery's natural decline, because they'll lose a little bit in storage, and the roughly 1 amp hour per month that the specs claim that the BMV-712 will draw off of this battery, because it's monitoring, you know, it's got its Bluetooth monitor connected, even though it's not broadcasting necessarily, it's active, right? So that's an interesting point. Second interesting point was just that the voltage, go to the next one here, the voltage was about 13.3, and that 13.3 held all winter. Even though the batteries were declining through the course of the winter, the terminal voltage looked the same. And I'll say, just from working with lithium batteries in the past, that's something that the battery engineers had a lot of fun or challenge with, however you want to put it. Made their life more interesting, which is, you'd like to be able to tell the state of charge of the battery based on its terminal voltage, but sometimes the state of charge will change and it doesn't necessarily show up at the terminals. And which is why you run a monitor like this that counts how many amps you pull out over time. And then you and the battery engineers will compare the two, and in their algorithms to understand, if you had a car, with a electric car, they'd be looking at the amp hour change, and they'd be looking at the terminal voltage change as well, and perhaps some other parameters. So in any case, we ended up here. Here was around 14.2, and at that point the batteries, the BMS battery manager starts to do the equalization of cells, and then we went up, and I cut it off here at about 14.5. Given that I had more than a half hour, probably close to an hour of it equalizing again. Then finally I've got this one that's called starter battery, and what starter battery is on the BMV is I have, because I'm monitoring one 12-volt battery completely, I have this one that's called starter battery set up to measure both batteries together. And so I can do a comparison, and normally what happens is the voltage of the pack is almost exactly double what a single battery is. And as long as the two batteries are equal to each other and matching, I'm feeling pretty confident that we've got a balanced, equalized system. The interesting point, which I mentioned a little earlier in this video, was that the battery with the monitor on it was apparently drawn down a little bit more than the battery that didn't have the monitor, as you would expect. And so, just as the curiosity of things, if you look at the charging here, I'm going to go back for a second. If you look at the single battery with the monitor on it, you can see how long it took to charge, and then it turns up pretty sharply. If you look at the pair, you can see that the pair started to pick up a lot earlier as the battery without the monitor on it started to come up in voltage more quickly and then tapered off, and then the second one chimed in, and we ended up getting up here and bringing the whole pair up and equalizing them out together. And I guess finally you can see the one battery ended up at 14.5. It was still charging at about 0.4 of an amp, just a tiny bit. And so here it's 2 times, so this would be 29.02, and the pair is running at 29.1. So, they're what, 0.08 volts apart when I stop charging, which is pretty darn close. And I expect when they relax and settle in, they'll be equal by the time I get the boat set into the water. That's how my latest winterizing and unwinterizing process worked. That's all for now.